You spend $300 on a high-tech synthetic jacket, yet you're shivering in 40-degree weather. Meanwhile, a medieval peasant in simple wool stayed warm through winters that hit minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. What's going on here? The problem isn't your expensive outer layer, it's what you're wearing underneath it. That cotton t-shirt is sabotaging your entire thermal system from within. Modern comfort has made our bodies weaker at generating natural heat, and we've forgotten the three-layer system that kept people alive in brutal conditions. Today we're diving into the science of why medieval clothing worked and why yours doesn't. Let's start with the biggest culprit in your closet. Cotton is a hydrophilic fiber, which means it loves water. When you sweat or get caught in light rain, cotton absorbs that moisture and holds onto it. But here's where it gets dangerous. Wet cotton collapses. Those tiny air pockets that provide insulation when the fabric is dry, they disappear under the weight of the water. The cotton fibers straighten out and lie flat against your skin. Now your base layer isn't insulating you anymore, it's actively conducting heat away from your body. This is why outdoor professionals have a saying, "Cotton kills." It's not hyperbole. Wet cotton can pull heat from your core for hours, leading to hypothermia even on seemingly mild days. Your expensive jacket becomes irrelevant when your base layer is working against you. But the problem goes deeper than just fabric choice. Modern humans live in what scientists call thermoneutral zones. We move from heated homes to climate-controlled cars to heated offices. Our bodies rarely experience non-life-threatening cold stress. This constant comfort has consequences. Our natural defenses against cold have atrophied. Medieval people had faster, stronger shivering responses. Their bodies were quicker to pull blood away from hands and feet to protect vital organs. They were physiologically tougher because their environment demanded it. Think about it. A medieval person lived with the seasons. They spent hours outdoors daily. Their homes were drafty, heated only by a single central hearth. Their bodies were constantly adapting to temperature changes. They were naturally cold acclimatized. We've traded that resilience for convenience. Central heating lets us make fatal clothing choices without immediate consequences. We can wear cotton jeans and thin hoodies in winter because we're never more than a few steps from artificial warmth. There's also a psychological factor. We choose clothes based on fashion and social signaling, not survival function. This is a luxury purchased by cheap fossil fuels. When heating a poorly built house costs just a few dollars a month, thermal efficiency doesn't matter. Medieval people couldn't afford this luxury. While their clothing was also a status symbol, the primary driver in winter was survival. A peasant's heavy wool tunic and a noble's fur-lined cloak were solving the same thermal problem, just with different materials. Making a fashionable but dysfunctional choice wasn't a style statement. It was potentially lethal. Modern homes prove this disconnect. During power outages, our houses drop 1 degree per hour. Within 12 hours in severe cold, they reach dangerous temperatures. We've built thermal houses of cards that collapse the moment we stop pumping energy into them. Compare this to surviving medieval structures in Scandinavia and Russia. During multi-day blizzards at minus 40 degrees, these buildings maintain livable temperatures with just one fire per day. Some stay above freezing for over 72 hours with no fire at all. The medieval approach wasn't primitive. It was sophisticated engineering that worked with physics, not against it. They understood something we've forgotten. Your body is a heating engine, but only if you give it the right tools. That cotton t-shirt under your high-tech jacket, it's not just failing to help, it's actively sabotaging your body's thermal system. Medieval people avoided this failure completely by building their clothing around materials that worked with their physiology. They had a saying, "Only lazy and stupid freeze." This wasn't cruel, it was practical wisdom. Survival wasn't random luck. It was skill, knowledge, and the right system working together. We don't have to guess about medieval clothing systems. The ice is giving up its secrets. Norway's Secrets of the Ice project has been recovering artifacts from melting glaciers for over a decade. These aren't museum pieces or artistic representations. They're actual garments worn by real people who survived in conditions that would kill us today. In 2019, researchers pulled a complete woven Viking mitten from a mountain pass. It had been preserved in ice for over 1,000 years. The construction is remarkable. Dense wool yarn, tightly woven, with a complex pattern that creates multiple layers of trapped air. This wasn't casual clothing. This was survival technology. They've also recovered complete Iron Age tunics. The weave patterns show sophisticated understanding of thermal physics. Multiple yarn weights in a single garment, tight weaves at stress points for durability, looser weaves in body areas to maximize air trapping. Every design choice served a thermal function. But the most telling evidence comes from medieval Russia. Historical records document winters when the Baltic Sea froze solid. Ships were trapped in ice from November through April. These weren't occasional cold snaps. They were sustained, brutal conditions colder than anything we experience today. Yet people didn't just survive, they thrived. Russian chronicles describe active trade, construction, and daily life continuing through these extreme winters. The key was their clothing system. Archaeological finds from medieval Russian sites reveal the three-layer approach in detail. Layer 1 was the linen chemise worn directly against the skin. This wasn't about insulation. This was about hygiene and moisture management. Medieval people understood something crucial. Their valuable wool layers were expensive and difficult to wash. The linen chemise served as a washable barrier, protecting the wool from body oils and sweat. But linen had another critical property. Unlike cotton, linen fibers have natural capillary action. When you sweat, linen pulls that moisture away from your skin without structural collapse. The fibers don't straighten and flatten like cotton does when wet. They maintain their structure and continue moving moisture outward. This is why linen was the foundation of the system. It kept the skin drier and the insulation layer cleaner. Medieval people could wear the same wool tunic for weeks or months because the linen underneath was doing the dirty work and getting washed regularly. Layer 2 was the wool tunic, the insulating engine of the entire system. This layer had one job: trap body heat. The genius was in the modular approach. Need more warmth? Add another wool layer. Medieval Russians would wear multiple rubakas, one over the other. Women might add an extra kirtle over their first one. The most sophisticated version was the gambeson, a quilted jacket stuffed with wool or linen tow. The quilted construction created dozens of individual air-trapping chambers. These chambers prevented the insulation from shifting or settling. Each quilted section maintained its loft independently. If one area compressed, the others continued insulating. This quilted design also distributed body heat evenly. Instead of hot spots and cold spots, the gambeson created a uniform thermal field around the torso. Modern sleeping bag manufacturers use the same principle with baffled construction, but here's what made wool the perfect insulation material. Each wool fiber has a three-dimensional crimp structure. Under a microscope, wool looks like tiny coiled springs. These springs create millions of stable air pockets within the yarn and fabric. Air is the actual insulator, not the fiber itself. When wool gets wet, those crimped fibers don't collapse like cotton. They maintain their springy structure and continue trapping air. This is the famous wool insulates when wet property that has saved countless lives. Crimp is nature's high loft technology. Layer 3 was the weather shield. Dense wool cloaks with natural lanolin coating, fur-lined capes for the wealthy, leather outer garments for wind protection. This layer's job was simple: block wind and shed precipitation before it could reach the insulation layer. Medieval hoods were particularly sophisticated. The Google and Chaperone weren't just hats. They were integrated thermal systems that covered the head, neck, and shoulders. They sealed the thermal chimney at the neck where rising body heat would otherwise escape. The complete system left zero thermal bridges. Every gap was sealed against convective heat loss. Sleeves were designed to overlap with gloves or mittens. Tunics extended below the belt line to overlap with leg coverings. hoods integrated with shoulder coverage. Medieval people understood that a thermal system is only as strong as its weakest point. One unsealed gap could compromise the entire envelope. They treated clothing construction like military engineering because for them it was a matter of life and death. The system also breathed properly. While blocking air infiltration, it allowed moisture vapor to escape. The natural fibers created a vapor-permeable barrier. Sweat could evaporate and exit the system without allowing cold air to enter. This is why the medieval system worked in active conditions. A person could chop wood or walk long distances without overheating. The system managed moisture while maintaining insulation. Modern synthetic systems often trap vapor, creating a clammy microclimate that leads to rapid cooling when activity stops. The three layers work together like a sophisticated machine. The linen managed moisture and hygiene. The wool provided thermal mass and insulation. The outer shell blocked weather. Each layer enhanced the other's performance. Remove any one layer, and the system's effectiveness dropped dramatically. This wasn't just clothing, it was wearable architecture designed by people who understood that thermal failure meant death. To understand why medieval clothing worked so well, we need to dive into the physics of the materials themselves. This isn't just historical curiosity, this is hard science that explains why natural fibers dominated cold weather survival for thousands of years. Let's start with wool's secret weapon, lanolin. This is the waxy substance that sheep naturally produce in their sebaceous glands. It's not actually a fat, despite being called wool fat. It's a complex mixture of sterile esters that serves as the sheep's built-in waterproofing system. Medieval people used wool that was unprocessed or only minimally processed. This means the lanolin was still coating the fibers. They were essentially wearing nature's version of Gore-Tex technology. Water would bead up and roll off their cloaks instead of soaking through, but lanolin does something even more sophisticated. While the surface of the wool fiber repels liquid water, the core of the fiber can absorb water vapor up to 30% of its weight. This creates a hygroscopic core with a hydrophobic surface. The wool pulls moisture vapor away from your skin's microclimate without feeling wet or clammy. This dual-action moisture management is impossible to replicate with synthetic materials. Modern DWR coatings wear off after repeated washing. Lanolin is part of the fiber structure itself. It's permanent, renewable, and completely natural. Now let's talk about the crimp structure that makes wool's insulation properties so remarkable. Under magnification, a wool fiber looks like a tiny helical spring. This three-dimensional crimp creates millions of stable air pockets within the yarn. These aren't random gaps that collapse under pressure, they're engineered spaces maintained by the fiber's spring structure. When cotton gets wet, its straight fibers absorb water and collapse under the weight. The fabric becomes dense and loses all its insulating air pockets. When wool gets wet, those crimped fibers maintain their spring structure. They continue trapping insulating air even when thoroughly soaked. This is why wool's insulates when wet property isn't just marketing, it's physics. The crimp doesn't disappear when wet, it springs back when dried. This resilience meant medieval people could work in snow, get caught in rain, or sweat heavily without losing their thermal protection. Compare this to modern synthetic insulators. Polyester fleece and Primaloft are hydrophobic, meaning they don't absorb water at all. This makes them dry faster than wool, which sounds like an advantage. But they lack wool's sophisticated moisture management system. They either repel all moisture, creating a vapor barrier effect, or they wick it so aggressively that you feel clammy. Synthetics also fail the sustainability test that matters to anyone interested in traditional skills. They're petroleum-based, energy-intensive to produce, and they shed microplastics with every wash. These microplastics end up in waterways and food chains. Wool is renewable, biodegradable, and actually improves soil when it decomposes. There's also the fire safety factor that's crucial for anyone living close to nature. Wool is naturally flame resistant. It will char and self-extinguish when exposed to flame. Synthetic materials melt and stick to skin, causing severe burns. For people working around campfires, wood stoves, or oil lamps, this difference could be life or death. Medieval people also understood wool's antimicrobial properties. Wool can be worn for days or weeks without retaining body odor. The lanolin coating and the fiber structure itself resist bacterial growth. Synthetics, especially older generations, become unwearable after a single day of heavy use. The sustainability comparison reveals why natural fibers dominated for so long. A wool garment could last decades with proper care. It could be repaired, altered, and eventually composted. A synthetic garment might be lighter and dry faster, but it represents a permanent environmental cost. For medieval people, these weren't abstract considerations. They were practical necessities. They needed materials that worked reliably in extreme conditions, could be maintained with simple tools, and didn't depend on complex supply chains. The physics of natural fibers created a perfect storm of properties: water-resistant, insulation when wet, moisture management, durability, repairability, and sustainability. No single synthetic material has replicated this complete package. This is why understanding material physics matters today. We're not just studying history. We're rediscovering why certain materials dominated human survival technology for millennia. If these medieval systems were so effective, why did we abandon them? The answer lies in three converging forces that prioritized speed and profit over thermal performance. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Suddenly, manufacturing speed became more important than product quality. Scribe-fit construction took skilled craftsmen weeks to complete a single garment. Factory-produced clothing could be made in hours using unskilled labor. Cotton became king not because it was superior, but because it was profitable. Cotton plantations using enslaved labor made this inferior fiber cheaper than quality wool processing. Mill owners could produce cotton fabric at a fraction of wool's cost. The market chose economics over physics. Then came cheap fossil fuels. In the early 1900s, coal was abundant and inexpensive. Later, oil and natural gas became even cheaper. When you could heat a poorly built house for just a few dollars a month, thermal efficiency became irrelevant. Why invest in expensive wool clothing when you could just turn up the thermostat? The post-World War II building boom accelerated this disconnect. Millions of homes were needed fast. The construction methods that became standard were optimized for initial sale price, not lifetime operating costs. Developers could maximize profit by building cheap and letting homeowners pay the ongoing energy costs. Trade schools abandoned traditional knowledge. As industrial methods replaced artisan skills, the accumulated wisdom of generations simply died out. Schools stopped teaching fiber properties, traditional construction techniques, and thermal physics. The knowledge that kept people alive for thousands of years was discarded as obsolete. Marketing campaigns convinced consumers that synthetic high-tech materials surpassed natural alternatives in every metric. Better living through chemistry became the motto. Natural materials were portrayed as primitive, uncomfortable, and outdated. Synthetic became synonymous with progress. This knowledge didn't disappear everywhere. In rural Alaska, parts of Scandinavia, and remote regions of Russia, people still live in structures built using these traditional methods. They burn a fraction of the fuel their neighbors consume. They stay comfortable when power goes out. They maintain the knowledge the rest of us discarded. The irony is stark. The average American home uses about 90 million BTUs for heating yearly. We appear to have advanced, but we've actually regressed in thermal efficiency. Modern homes seem cheaper to build, but over a lifetime they're far more expensive to operate. A stick frame home in a cold climate might cost $3,000 to $5,000 yearly in heating bills. Over 30 years, that's $90,000 to $150,000. A well-built structure using traditional principles costs more upfront, but operates at a fraction of those costs. The skills required for traditional construction exist in only a handful of practitioners. When the last generation that knew these methods dies, the knowledge dies with them. We're witnessing the extinction of survival wisdom that took millennia to develop. The medieval system used 15 million BTUs yearly, while modern approaches consume 90 million. The difference isn't just efficiency, it's understanding physics instead of fighting it. Look for 100% wool-based layers and avoid cotton completely in cold conditions. Build your thermal system using natural fibers that work with your body's heat generation, not against it. The knowledge still exists. We just have to choose to use it. Subscribe for our follow-up video covering modern brands applying these traditional principles.